My parents witnessed these fleeting identity crises of mine from afar. One day my mother told me that it was time for me to change the clothes I had used since high school, but to be careful not to spend too much money on clothes that I would later give up to regret. I doubt she was too surprised when she saw me reverted to the old self. At that time, after completing the last exams, I was already preparing my thesis. When Roberta came to disturb my isolation to ask me to help with hers, I flatly refused. Already on the phone, I begged her not to come to my house with her notes, but she, selfish as always, didn't want to hear reasons. She arrived, and I was still in bed in the dark, as always when I was down in the dumps. She asked my mother for permission to go upstairs, and she granted it, even begging her not to get me out of my smelly lair. I couldn't forgive my parent, whom I had already asked more than once to respect my space. Respect my space. I didn't have time to lock myself in, as Roberta was already forcing the door, starting the mischievous and very amused to a potion pour of about 10 minutes, in which only with a last desperate effort I managed to get the better of. Fused and stuck in pride, she went back downstairs to gossip with my mother. The latter agreed with her in everything, and tried to console her in her own way, that is, by going against me and accusing me of ruining her life. You don't know how hard it is to live with him. He seems so good at school and smart, but he's just a trouble boy. That is either torment to me, my husband, and the whole family. I saw no more, tired of eavesdropping at my bedroom door, and realizing that they had gone out into the hall to speak without being heard. I hauled myself to the balcony on the first floor and started throwing down all my mother's Flower pots. I could have hit one of them and smashed their skull, but at that moment I was really possessed by a blind fury. Roberta fled away, by my mother, who didn't want to cause a scandal in the neighborhood. Then the second tried to go upstairs to make me stop. Please, I didn't mean those things. She forced me to. You know it's not just my fault. Continuing to throw lamps, punishings, books, and pens down the stairs, I let what remained of my outburst fade only slowly. Liar, you only care that the neighbors don't hear and don't judge us, I said. What if it were? She said. It's also for your own good that they don't talk to you about it. It was useless to reason with her. Her eyes were already shining with perfidy. She really hoped, petty, to seduce me with her superficial and narrow view of the social world. However, I was proud to have given her and Roberta in my way the lesson they deserved. At the time, relations with all my friends had already loosened a lot because with my victim I could fear some chance encounter at university. She was the first to come forward a few months later. Apparently she hadn't given up on getting my preparation for a session. I offered it to her with pleasure at home and in my own time. I was still trying not to let myself go to my impending solitude. I was still yearning for the affection of some last friend. The first jolts of affectivity that awakened my sexuality in those late spring years materialized around the strange original figure of a boy. He attended the same Italian literature class as I did, and sat a few rows in front of my usual seat. Accustomed as I was to being ignored by the male world, straight or homosexual, I didn't even realize that I had attracted his attention for some strange reason. Only on the fourth or fifth day of class, I could say with certainty that he really turned my glances, only to be attracted by any other distraction that presented itself under his nose. He was blatantly gay, effeminate, and too handsome not to be indiscriminately courted by students of both genders. Accustomed myself to attracting the comments of those who were close to me only for the eccentricity of my person, at first I really believed that I had aroused his curiosity for the same reasons. For the same reason. It probably was, but I couldn't find out until a couple of years later when I finally decided the only case in my life to speak to him. I repeat that I had never been attracted much by effeminate types, so my love at first sight still leaves me intrigued today about the dynamics and hormonal chemistry that could have influenced my emotionality. Was it possible that, as inexperienced as I was in the affective field, I had simply been destabilized, destabilized by the attention of the other for the first time aroused by my own interest? The fact is that I had never found myself so close to such a perfect individual, and not only my eyes. Who knows, maybe my unconscious reached to the hypothesis of being able to find myself in his own shoes, and to unleash that affectivity, that general admiration that perennially covered him with an armor of fame. I spent the whole first year admiring him from a distance. He occasionally responded to my gazes, but never even took a step to address me too, like any other boy in the classroom. We met again in theatre history class, and then again round the courtyards. I always walked with my teachers. He was always surrounded by the usual circle of friends. In desperation, I finally decided to speak to him under a pretext too long after, when he must have already had some inkling of my psychic difficulties. He reacted with some disgust, but still he was kind. On still other occasions we said goodbye. We talked for a few seconds. I never had the opportunity to ask him to keep in touch at least via email. It was a disappointment for me, of course, but also the only moment of my life in which the possibility of a peaceful emotional life in the company of a person I adored, for which I would have forgotten my depression, had already been proposed to me. The violence of my family, my war-bound destiny, and immediately tending to inner suicide. After the end of the university, of course, I lost contact with the mysterious boy, and in vain I would have searched far and wide on social networks. Or, I committed the imprudence to ask the professor we had in common about him, who obviously laughed in my face. Today, in retrospect, I call myself stupid for not trying to forcefully extort his phone number or a different type of address. I would have liked to correspond with him at least. Even if I couldn't physically stand up to him, I could also have interested him from the philosophical side. He was a lover of literature. He aspired to journalism. However, a lot of our relationship was genuinely invented by me. As usual, a minimal approach to reality was enough for me to embroider a whole world of fantasy on it, so much so that when once we said goodbye in passing and he asked me to remind him please my name, I felt as if from the crowds. Ah, you don't even know who I am, I asked him. There were other guys who caught my attention in those days. Around the age of 20, male and female beauty explodes with the scent of 1,000 floral varieties. Naturally, that is the age most predisposed to mating, and my deviant sexuality also had to suffer. I could arouse the looks of some overly attractive boy who gave me milk to my knees, and while trembling to the point of delirium, I still liked to fantasize that maybe at any moment he could speak to me. I would have been kind, even stammering. I would have told him something intelligent, and he would have answered with a smile. None of this, unfortunately, never. I suspect they saw me as a personality alien to their world. While observing me with some interest from afar, none of those delicious spring fruits ever came a step closer. I was shivering in my winter. Gradually I passed away without even being able to enjoy a casual touch, a word a word that was addressed only to me and that identified me in that increasingly crowded, increasingly marginalized world. Yeah, I have already mentioned that in the end, at the age of despair and aware of the passing of time, I turned to social media and planned some blind dates. In a couple of cases, I confided perhaps too much in my distinct as a modern student, and I agreed with the anonymous students to known on the net a meeting place to discuss our lives, common interests already anticipated in chat. Nobody ever showed up. Someone even virtually disappeared. Someone else confessed to me that they prefers to go back after seeing me from afar. Thank you for listening to me. See you in the next video.